Welcome to Sunicorn Nation, a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs, brought to you by the Sunicorn Collective. My name is Mohammed Tariq, founder of Earth, and I have been an entrepreneur for the last 20 years.
And my name is Gokula Krishna Subramaniam, founder of Vircle, Malaysia's first family finance app. The Sunicorn Collective is a peer-to-peer leadership and learning community for mature and growth stage entrepreneurs. While our in-person and live engagements are exclusively for members only, we believe that the knowledge gained and the lessons learned should be shared across a wider ecosystem and society at large. And this is how this podcast was born. We hope these learnings will accelerate your entrepreneurial journey and perhaps pave your way to becoming Malaysia's next Sunicorn.
The opinions, views, and content expressed on the Sunicorn Nation podcast are those of the entrepreneurs and guests featured and do not reflect the official policies or positions of Proficio Consultants, Penjana Capital, or the rest of the Sunicorn Collective. Today, it is my pleasure to have Gokula Krishnan as my co-host and fellow entrepreneur. Welcome, Gokula.
Hello.
Before we dive into your journey with Vircle, let's start with a quick recap of recent Sunicorn activities. We both attended the Khazanah Megatrends Forum 2024. Can you tell me what were your key takeaways from the event? Did you enjoy it?
Well, I definitely enjoyed it. It was a fun and also extremely packed event for 2 days. And if I can summarize that, a few things that I took back, at least with the panel and sessions was, on one end, I think there was a lot of emphasis on where Malaysia is today. There's a lot to gain. There's a lot of global uncertainties, whether it's in the Middle East or Europe. There's also trade wars happening between US and China. And there was a lot of talk about how Malaysia could actually benefit from a lot of these global events and how the government and Khazanah specifically is investing for this. Now, what was very interesting is there's a lot of talk about how engineering, manufacturing, deep tech now as a new play. Engineering, manufacturing was actually old, right? We were in that, then we moved to service. Now it's becoming the flavor again. Now coupled with deep tech becomes key to Malaysia cementing, getting back into the Asian tiger position. But underpinning these two, I think two new themes I saw. One was sustainability, and also the quest for talent and how Khazanah and the government is investing or need to invest more on talent development across the society. Those are my key takeaways, alongside with a lot of networking opportunities with folks on the government, the Ministry of Finance, Khazanah, and a lot of the invitees.
So did you notice that 3 Sunicorn Collective members took picture with the PMX, and did you enjoy that part?
Oh yeah, it was quite nervous. I never had the opportunity to take pictures next to the Prime Minister, and he was also rushing out. So it was just, it's a good moment. And also, it's very proud to be part of the Dana Impact family.
Yeah, for sure.
Alongside yourself.
It felt really great, and we were actually very well showcased. I think our booths were in great place. Yeah. Your booth was actually near the registration. Mine was near the entrance. Yeah. So I think they actually did a great job to showcase all the Dana Impact companies. Correct. So it felt great. So thank you for those. Maybe I'll summarize a bit. And explain what was the theme of KMF2024. So actually, the title of the event was a bit funny, but actually it does make sense. I will explain it in a second. It was the pursuit of potatoes, paving paths from the probable to the possible. And actually, I do want to explain what that means. The rest of our coverage of KMF will actually be how it relates to Malaysian entrepreneurship. But actually, I think first we need to actually stop at the word potatoes. What does that actually mean? So basically, it was symbolizing 3 things that are related to potato as a crop. So that was productivity. So it actually has a high yield, resilience. It can stand different weather conditions, and also adaptability. So these are basically the kind of traits that you could use to describe an entrepreneur. Basically, has to be very resourceful, has to be relentless, and all that. So I think as a crop, it actually makes sense. But let's actually talk about the history of that. So basically, at some point in Chinese history,
500 years ago.
500 years ago,
Yeah.
there was basically like a famine. So everybody was starving, and there was sort of like a risk of a peasant revolt because of the lack of food. And then they basically someone introduced basically potato as a crop, which was actually not very commonly available at the time. And then that basically spread very, very rapidly, even though it is something so simple, but it was an innovation of the time. So an innovation to plant that crop. And then suddenly it basically spread very fast, and basically the famine was prevented, and then accordingly it actually made an effect and stabilized the whole country. So this is basically what the Khazanah Megatrends Forum was trying to find. What are the potatoes of our age? What are the simple solutions that can still seem small and creative today, yet they would have actually an amplified effect on complex systems, which is basically our world today. What do you think of the theme, actually? Let me see what you think of the potato idea.
Well, to me, it was unique. And also, not many people knew the significance of the theme, and also the significance of the sweet potato in China, right? So I think it's the quest that I think we need to do better to be the center in a very competitive, globalized world. And that's why we are doing what we're doing, right?
But through simple solutions.
Yeah, through very simple solutions, no complexity. Though I think today, the theme is a lot centered on AI. But the real quest is how can we apply these themes to solve everyday problems.
Did you try the potato ice cream?
No, I did not,
Yeah,
actually.
I did. So there was basically unlimited ice cream for 2 days. So yeah.
I had the French fries during dinner, though.
Great. All right. So let's move on to the PMX's statements. So basically, PMX highlighted the importance of navigating, and he actually used a word that I think I've never heard before in this context. So he basically said the current global post-normal world. So I think that everybody sees that our world, it doesn't play by the same rules of, for example, our parents' world. So I think that we are seeing now things like pandemics, 2 wars going on. There is actually a lot of uncertainty coming through. For example, technologies like AI. How many people are going to lose their jobs? How will that actually change things like education? Change, of course, how we earn income. How will that actually affect the gap between the developed countries and the developing countries? So many uncertainties, I think, as well as just throw in a bit of geopolitical tension as well. Is, for example, President Trump going to win, and we're going to see a continuation of the trade wars and things like that, or are we going back to normal? I think everybody kind of assume that we can expect this post-normal world to continue, I guess. These are not the PMX's words, but that is just what I understand from them. And then you're absolutely right about the emphasis on sustainability, the emphasis on well-being. I think we could have called this event the Khazanah ESG Forum, and the content would just be the same. So I think that this is the first time that we see that now ESG is not a side topic. It is actually kind of already embedded in the DNA of the mainstream conversation.
I mean, if I could add something, there was another term that Prime Minister used that gave a whole new meaning to capitalism. I mean, capitalism generally has been seen by this part of the world and developing world as the bad thing, right? And he brought this concept term called capitalism with empathy, right? I think that's something that can resonate with many people, because you can't fight capitalism, but maybe apply responsible capitalism with some empathy to people the have-nots, right? So that was another, I think, interesting term that we will probably hear a bit more going forward, no? Capitalism with empathy.
Yeah, I think they actually kept describing it by saying that capitalism only raises the ceiling, but then the empathy part raises the floor. Correct. So it's not like you have a widening gap. You actually pull everybody up with you So I think that this is sort of a new paradigm. Okay, so he actually used, yes, different words, but basically he quoted the Nobel laureate who was actually speaking at the event. The Nobel laureate used progressive capitalism, but then the prime minister basically rephrased it in his own way. Okay, so let's go into the themes. So actually, I have prepared a short recap of the themes of the event. Of course, we can't go segment by segment. It was a 2-day event, and this podcast is not long enough. But basically, I think everybody was discussing how the global economic landscape has changed. It used to be assumed that basically China and India are actually moving in the same direction, but now suddenly they seem to be diverging. So what do you think about that? Do you notice that at all, or you just heard it over there?
I mean, I listen to a lot of YouTube, shorts and clips on these two global giants, India and China. I think for a long time, the West has been building or trying to build a global narrative and set global standards. But right now, eventually China came up and said, no, we want to set our own standards, make our own decisions on what's right and wrong. And I believe that the current decade is going to be India's to decide. So there's not going to be a West versus East, or BRICS versus the G7 and so on. But I see it's going to be more of all the big powers. If you are capable, you will pick and choose what makes sense for you. And that's going to continue to happen now. And sooner or later, with Malaysia joining the BRICS, or at least aspiring to join the BRICS nations, there will be a stronger bloc. Especially in a time when United Nations becoming less and less, relevant and making quick decisions. Even recently, the Indian foreign minister called UN out for its slow reaction to many of the geopolitical situations. So yeah, I think being in the East and Southeast Asia, we have a lot of potential to make decisions and chart our own course, and I think depends on how Mr. Prime Minister takes that forward.
I think everyone basically agrees that we are going through a period of supply chain realignments. I think what happened during COVID made everybody wake up. Actually, globalization didn't really work, right? You had so many disruptions. We can't get the vaccines on time, and all of the supply chain problems there. Then after that, we had the impact of inflation, interest rates, and then of course the technological disruption caused by AI and the sort of the gold rush that is happening in AI now. However, there was actually good news. I mean, Malaysia's economic position is strong. It grew in the first half of 2024 by 5.1%, which is, I think, amazing. It's better than expected. The key growth sectors were manufacturing, services, and tourism. But of course, everybody agrees that the ambition is to grow stronger and find more opportunities in the semiconductor industry, and then moving up the value chain of that industry to fuel all the technology development that is happening in the world. Government initiatives and their impact on entrepreneurship, of course, it's a big theme. This is actually two people that did receive sort of Khazanah funding. So what do you think of that? Some people say that the government responsible for 70% of early stage investing is not a good thing, while some other people, I guess we are recipients, so we think it's a good thing, but while other people say, well, the government has to do it because the private sector isn't doing it.
Well, you see, today there's a lot of capital and there's a lot of opportunity in a globalized world. A lot of foreign capital seem to today lean towards large economies, big countries, and global problems. Now, what happens is when that happens, local innovation, which has ability to go global, can't thrive or take off to begin with, because innovation and entrepreneurship needs capital, right? No capital.
They're not on a level playing field.
Yeah, it's not a level playing field, right? I mean, even in my own field, your own field, I would say the amount of investments we've raised, being a Malaysian-based company versus our counterparts in Indonesia.
Same numbers, and they like triple or five times the valuation.
Yeah, we are making more revenue, but they have raised almost 7 times more than us. So that's the reality. So sometimes government needs to sort of inject some of these funds and I'm not saying give free money, be very tough in
Yeah,
your
be on the cap table.
yeah, be on the cap
take the ride.
table, and then get these entrepreneurs and startups launched and kicked off, and then as they start gaining traction, then okay, you go out and find your own capital and scale the business. Or maybe government will come up and say, okay, if you're going to go outside of Malaysia, like what MDEC is doing with its export grants and so on, now we will seed you further now to take this and go and set up and become a global company versus a local company. So I think we've got all the initiatives right, and the execution is also in the right direction, because instead of the ministries doing it directly, now they've tasked people like Khazanah and all the other funds linked to government to do it, and I think they're doing a fantastic job.
But everyone in mainstream media criticizes Khazanah when one of their investment doesn't go well. So what do you think about that?
I mean, generally, what people don't understand is, like everything, whether it's the pension fund, is Khazanah, whether it's our EPF or Temasek for the matter, investment comes with risk. You need to look at the total returns over 5 or 10 years. For example, we are part of the Dana Impact Fund, which is considered a patient capital fund. Whereas a lot of venture capitals have much, much higher return requirements over a shorter period of time. So, yeah, you will win some, lose some, but what you need to see is aggregate, are you growing? And I think if you look at Khazanah's own track record over the last 15, 20 years, right, they have shown pretty good growth. And obviously, the ones who criticize, they don't look at the numbers.
Yeah.
Right. With social media, you can be armchair critics.
Yeah, it's like don't get the facts get in the way of the narrative, right? So people just want to criticize, but they don't look at actually all the facts and see that in 30 years, Khazanah has delivered amazing value, and actually it is kind of a bit out of character. I mean, everybody would agree that it's a bit out of character for a sovereign wealth fund to get involved in seed stage investing. I mean, I think we haven't seen that a lot in the world, but I think they stepped in because they saw that the private sector was snoozing, basically.
Yeah, and also if you look at Malaysia, if you look at our pension fund, I mean, we've been getting on average more than 5% returns every year, which is impressive, and of course, Khazanah has a dual role. It's not just bringing returns to the government. They also have certain nation building duty, right? So they shouldn't be loss making, which they're not.
Of course,
they are expected to bring returns to the government. But then they also sometimes have to make decisions that, okay, like for example, Malaysia Airlines, right? I'm going to go in, I'm going to pump in money, I'm going to clean their books and let them start to scale. And they've posted a profit recently. The same way, now they've come to early stage startups like the Dana Impact Fund, which you would have never expected a sovereign wealth fund to do.
Great. So that's sort of their duty is to step in when no one else is doing it, right? If we don't do it, no one is going to do it. But it's important for the nation, so let's push it forward.
And if I could add, right, they are not outlier in this. In Singapore, Temasek also has subsidiary funds like Vertex and so on that invest in early stage investments.
But
right?
Definitely they don't reach 70% of early stage investing. Even all of them together is not at 70%.
I mean, they wrote one of the early checks to Grab.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's the right thing to do, and I hope people will understand that.
So what would you tell actually new entrepreneurs? Like, do you think that now this has unlocked sort of like the golden age of Malaysian entrepreneurship? Because now suddenly capital is not the problem, which has been the problem for the last 10, 15 years.
I mean, you have two choices, right? Either you can sit down and complain, or you can do something about it. I remember when I wanted to transition from really comfortable corporate life to entrepreneurship, every single person I spoke to said, you will fail. Your skin,
big mistake. Yeah.
Your skin color is not right.
I think we met around that time, 2019, 2018.
Yeah, your skin color is not right. You're not going to put all sorts of negativity, right? But the reality is, after becoming an entrepreneur and getting support from many government agencies, whether it's Cradle, MOSTI, Khazanah, MOF, and so on, what I realize is really the barrier is here, right? If you have a problem that's important enough, big enough to solve, and you show effort that you're doing something to solve that, there are people who will come and give you access to capital.
Yeah.
So I don't think access to capital should be an excuse. I think we just need to find a way to be visible to access capital.
But this brings us to the next point, which
Yeah.
is when it comes to innovation and technology, every startup needs to have a global mindset because in a sense you're not just competing with people in your city or in your country. Actually, your innovation should at least have the potential, if it's really solving a problem, to actually scale globally. And I think that it was emphasized that maybe people are not ambitious enough yet.
Yeah, and it brings me to a term that I remember, right? Global, right? Think global, flavor local, right? And I think that's quite critical, and I don't see a barrier. I mean, of course, entrepreneurship is not easy. People think, it's easy to get access to funding, but the reality is, less than 5% of entrepreneurs actually get funded. But if every failure that you go through is a lesson to learn, right, and get better at the next one.
So on this podcast, we try to tell the truth. We don't try to romanticize entrepreneurship or startup life. At the same time, we also have to say sort of the other side of things. So, for example, there was one venture capitalist who was on stage who said that, guys, I love what you're doing here, but the fact is historical venture capital returns in Malaysia have been low. Fact. Okay, we agree with that, but that is maybe because there hasn't been a very active exit market, right? So actually all those companies maybe are doing well, maybe revenues growing, but they have sort of, because they're, kind of lagging and, they've been around for like 10 years, 15 years, some companies 17, 20 years, and no exit in sight. So of course, there's not going to be kind of locked in returns for the venture capital industry, right? So that's why I think we need, there is parts of the puzzle that are missing, like, for example, listing of secondary shares, right? So that at least the early investors can pass the baton to newer investors who are have a different risk profile, and once the fund runs out of time, they don't feel locked perpetually into the company. So you agree with that, right?
Yeah, but I didn't agree with the VC though.
But the returns are actually low.
No, if you look collectively
Oh.
on exits and return,
Okay.
there was a recent actual data that was published, I think last year. It shows that the percentage return on a Malaysian investment is much higher than counterparts in Indonesia and so on. Now,
But that might be because they have high valuations. So in the end, they basically do
Yeah.
down rounds. They sell for not much
Correct.
money,
Correct.
and we are always a bargain. We're always a good deal, right?
So there's less money, but better quality exits here. So which means if a venture cap has a huge war chest, then it becomes even more difficult. Which brings me to our conversation when we had with Bramal, right? I mean, his latest fund, he decided to cap it, even though people wanted to give him more money, because he said, I don't have places to put this money, right? So I'd rather raise less and just focus on bringing better returns. Yeah. So, and I think that's where the government's role comes in, to sort of incubate more high quality startups, and also go down to the root, because you want to build deep tech engineering know-how. You need to make sure that you start with the right talent and the right education syllabus and so on. So if you ask me, one of the key things is we need to go back to the schools and revisit what we teach our kids, and start to, I think that transformation needs to start very quickly.
So actually, I met an entrepreneur today who is actually the latest recipient of Dana Impact funding.
Yeah.
It's actually a robotics academy called Jazro.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. It's free, and you can basically send your son or daughter there to learn how to build robots. There's a bit of AI in there. So it's really amazing. And you see, this is the kind of funding that Dana Impact is being used for, and we actually were discussing some project that we would do together. So yeah, I'm very excited about the future. I really think that we are about to see something amazing. The golden age of Malaysian entrepreneurship is, we are at the dawn. It's coming.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last few points, just to cover everything: sustainability and social responsibility. So there is, of course, amazing opportunities in green tech, sustainable business models, humane economy for social justice, addressing also the aging population and also some business opportunities that are attached to that. Do you have anything to say about that?
No,
So we have Care Concierge is of course one of the Dana Impact companies that they're handling that, and to some extent, Kiddo Care handles the kids, and then Care Concierge handles the later part of life. Collaborations and partnerships, importance of strategic partnerships. Collaboration between startups and cliques. Actually, that was one of our recommendations for the budget, right?
Correct.
So we actually asked the government to
get GLCs
involved in the startup ecosystem, whether at the exits or other types of involvement, acqui-hires or whatever. So we actually did an elaborate recommendation on that one. Then Malaysia is preparing for ASEAN chairmanship in 2025. So that opens up great opportunities to showcase the things that have worked on the Malaysian side and then scaling them to the rest of ASEAN.
Correct.
So I'm very excited about that. I think your company is probably, you're trying to go to other ASEAN countries at the moment, or have you gone already?
It's not official yet,
but
we are we will be announcing something soon. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you can't run away from being regional.
Right.
Coming out of Malaysia, right?
Cool. Okay. I think we only have a couple of points left. Okay, skills development and human capital. So we need upskilling, reskilling amid tech disruptions. When people lose their jobs due to AI, they need to be reskilled or upskilled and move to other parts or pursue entrepreneurship if that is their thing. Of course, there is challenges of sort of low wages. And the need to boost productivity, and then challenges and risks. So of course, everybody cannot escape from geopolitical tensions. They do affect business whether we like it or not. Then also regulatory changes, policy shifts, strategies for building resilience in an uncertain global environment. I think the way we have been, dealing with our environment basically for the last couple of decades, I think it has been very, very irresponsible as a global society. I think we are, we know when basically the rising sea level displaces, 1 billion people. When, as we saw in some research, there is a risk that by, I think, 2040, that the water would actually, like KLIA, would be on the beach, right? So the water would come closer. So these are going to open up other challenges, right? Like, for example, let's say if the water submerges a landfill, for example, and that landfill, there's a lot of toxicity that has been deposited there over many decades. So what would happen then to the level of pollution unlocked through this water? So there is all of these kinds of uncertainties due to the changing global environment. That's why we really need to get serious about that. So I think that's why the theme is sort of ESG, right? So E is environment, S is the people, and then G is the role of government in managing the entire situation. So as I said, it could have been the Khazanah ESG forum and the content wouldn't change.
Yeah.
Okay. I also had a chance to attend a PR workshop that was organized by the Sunicorn Collective. So this PR workshop basically was actually a lot of fun. You didn't manage to come, right?
I missed it, but I think someone from my team attended.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah. I didn't notice. But it was a lot of fun. Did he or she tell you how much we laughed?
Yeah, but you know what's interesting? On the way to the workshop, she actually met a potential client.
Oh.
And now we're pitching to them for business.
Nice.
You just don't know.
You never know what to expect from this. Okay, great. Yeah. Good that you managed to send someone, because it was actually a great session. So in this session, we basically heard from Evelyn Yap. She's from a PR agency called Citrine, and basically her segment was about the power of PR. So how to craft a standout strategy for your business. Don't just treat PR as sort of a reactive thing. Whenever you launch a new product, you just send a press release out or whatever. No, she actually wanted us to understand that PR can be a very powerful tool that helps you shape the narrative for your company in the market and towards society. So she shared some fascinating stories about like proactive versus reactive PR. So one of her clients, for example, used constant PR messaging to shape their product line. So let's say, for example, they wanted to launch a new product line. So they would launch, for example, press release that, for example, these are, let's say, the top 10 dishes that our survey has shown are the favorite of Malaysians. And then they would basically create products that correspond to those dishes. So you can buy like a nasi lemak shirt or a laksa t-shirt or something like that. And then the people that basically like those dishes would basically become the target audience, and they use PR to push this messaging out as a sales strategy. She also shared how to react when your company is being attacked in the media, when you're under fire, what to do. So basically, the key message here is that if you are being attacked unfairly, if what is being said is, for example, you being accused of something, or whether the facts are wrong, then it's usually good to get the authorities involved. So you file an MCMC complaint, or you file a police report, and then you make a PR statement saying that, hey, we have nothing to hide, we got the authorities involved so they can investigate and so on. And once you do that, you're already, sort of on the higher ground, because you basically have nothing to hide. And now you're, if there would be something as this claim is made, then obviously it will be revealed by the authorities. So since you took the first step towards the authorities, it puts you in a stronger position. Basically, if the information is also defamatory or wrong, outright wrong, you can also turn the table and simply ask the other party to prove it. So if it's totally baseless, then that also puts the burden on them to actually prove what they're saying. Then after that, we heard from Tim, an entrepreneur who is behind the Colony co-working space. His segment was titled Building a Strong Brand, How PR Shaped Colony's Identity. So actually he had a great story. He emphasized that he likes to be bold with PR. So he says that, look, if you use PR well, you can save a lot of money in other marketing. So you don't need the social media agency, for example, just save that budget for a good PR agency. And then I don't know if viewers remember, but there was this viral cheating husband billboard. If you remember, there was this message, right? You remember that? Yeah. So it's like, hi, so-and-so, next time use a windowless room when you're cheating on me, your soon-to-be ex-wife or whatever. So that actually, he actually paid like a few thousand just to get that billboard for a few seconds. And then he stood in front of the billboard for those few seconds and snapped a photo with his phone, and then he shared it on social media, and then it basically went viral. So he said that was like amazing result, because it did get a lot of attention for his co-working space and so on. But he did say that obviously no PR agency or sort of legal advisor would have approved that, right? Because Correct. What if, even though he used fictional names, it actually turns out that the man's name that he used in that ad was actually like there was a real guy called that name, right? So that kind of made it funny. But then basically the wife of that real guy kind of understood that it wasn't him when the name of the wife was different, right? So then that kind of cooled things off. Then after that we had Roshan Kanasan. Of course, he interviewed me. Did he interview you as well, or you did with Rich?
Richard Bradbury.
Okay, so you did Richard, I did with Roshan. So Roshan was the one who interviewed me on BFM. So of course, like the guy for me is like an absolute pro, very, very well respected. I hear his voice, like few times a week when I'm driving and listening to BFM. His segment was about how to amplify your reach and use radio as a game-changing PR tool. So his insights was some do's and don'ts of being interviewed on radio. As an example, don't waffle. So waffle, the definition is saying nothing with a lot of words, just occupying the airspace, but you're basically not getting to the point. Answers usually need to be between 1 to 2 minutes. If it's longer than that, people are basically you're gonna lose their attention. Don't lie, don't sell too hard, these kinds of sort of common sense advice. Also, if you're trying to get the interview in the first place, he basically advised to send a personalized message. Like don't, for example, write, hey, dear editor, or these generalized, right? So write a personalized message, try to, get them, like to really read it, because they get like hundreds per day. So if it's not a personalized message, they will just quickly archive or delete and not really give it the attention that you want them to. And then finally, we had, of course, the legendary Karam of DNA. So he basically gave a segment about media mastery, writing press releases that get noticed. Of course, he sees like probably thousands of press releases per month. So he basically gave some examples of like funny press release that he received. What is the stuff that he just simply throws away very, without looking at it, how to actually get featured on his media. But to be honest, that segment was like sort of more a comedy, stand-up comedy than a workshop. It was just so funny, and so many things he said got everyone laughing. One like real tip that he said whenever your startup hires a new C-level hire, there is a lot of readers of his news media are looking for new jobs, right? So when you hire a new C-level, this new C-level probably going to hire people. So actually there was always going to be more readership. So when you hire a new C-level, that is actually newsworthy, and he usually runs these kinds of stories. So that is like good advice. So I think that this was sort of an amazing PR workshop, and the kind that could only be put together, by Doc Siva. Just this roster, everybody knew him. He was the moderator of the panel that happened at the end, and then the audience got to ask a lot of questions. I think in these kinds of instances, Doc Siva, because we believe in open source knowledge and we don't want to, our live sessions are behind closed doors, but when we have a session like this, which is very, very relevant to everybody, not just to Student Economic Collective, so Doc Siva would sometimes open it up to the public as well. So that's why in this particular instance, the room was, about maybe 20% Student Economic Collective members, and the rest were from other entrepreneurs and from corporate and so on. It was a full house, so it was really, really amazing. When I met you in 2019 in China, how far were you with the Vircle journey actually?
So that was September 2019 in the Ant Financial 10 by 1000 program, where we were the pioneer batch at Hangzhou. We had just at that point released a prototype, and we were still lost because we had not gone through the regulatory hurdle. We had not received approvals. Was still naive to think money will come very easy. If the product's there, we're going to run some trials and everything be okay. And then of course COVID came, and we learned the hard way that getting regulator approvals is no easy peasy piece of cake. But so I was still in the very super optimistic, everything's going to be okay mode, right? So was a lot of our peers. Some unfortunately over the years have shut down, and some Policy Street has gone on and raised Series Bs and so on.
Well, I remember that trip. It actually was life-changing in some ways. Maybe because this was sort of a fintech company that invited us, and everything that we heard there was sort of related to fintech. I'm in the recycling business, man. Like it really doesn't relate to fintech so much. Maybe the only aspect is that if your fintech becomes so popular that it's now a super app, and now they're gonna put some other mini programs inside, like maybe a recycling app or something like that. So it's slightly touched upon my product, but I think that more than maybe like a hardcore tactics, it was more about just the inspiration and seeing things done at scale, right? So
Correct.
Adoption of technology that, remember when we went to the wet market and we paid there for vegetables with QR and
and the smart shopping cart.
Yeah, so it was this kind of thing that was eye-opening. Although I think that the 10 by 1000 program, which is still around, by the way, I
don't know if they still do it in person anymore in China.
Yes, they do it, but it's not sort of like cohort based like it used to. Now it is sort of like how should I say, like it's happens whenever there is some big event, let's say in China, and then Alipay is involved in that event. So then they would choose a few of their alumni to come. Do you know that the alumni is now more than 900, right? So we were like, I think in the first 20 or 30, but after that, there was like so many things that now they're almost 1,000 people that are attached to that program. So as I said, they pick a few every now and then. and then they will also send them to China either to speak at the event or visit the ant spaces and so on. And I think that they are soon about to launch sort of a Malaysia chapter for the 10 by 1000 with like physical people on boots on the ground. And I think they are actually also doing a podcast about it.
Fantastic.
So I think they haven't announced it yet, but maybe I'll give a bit of preview of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me actually ask you, why would a high-flying corporate guy that used to manage hundreds of people and gets paid very well decide to say, I don't want it. I want to go solo. I want to start a company.
If you ask me now, I'm still asking the question why. Well, there's some genesis to this in the sense that, I was, lucky to climb up the corporate ladder very quickly with my last company. I mean, I've worked mostly with only two companies, Motorola and Ericsson. I spent bulk of my corporate career with Ericsson. Came up very quickly, and then I realized that it's very lonely in the top, in the corporate world, right?
It's even lonelier now, or
No, I
no?
mean,
Because you have the collective, huh?
because you're not the CEO of the company.
Okay.
But even then, in CEO company, listed company, you are very, answerable to the board. In an industry that's, becoming even more tough, broadcast media, telecoms, and, at some point, I always realized that in the corporate world, you can't really innovate. So most of the corporate ventures and corporate innovations fail. Because many people don't read the book Innovator's Dilemma by the late Clayton Christensen, right? And the reality is, in a corporate world, it's all about top line, bottom line, OPEX, right?
So there is culture mismatch with the value creation nature of startups.
Yeah, because unless you're super profitable, if you're a software company or you're a Google, an internet company, where your earnings is just in billions and billions, then you can say, okay, I'm going to burn $1 billion and go and play. But the general industry is not that fortunate, right? You're talking about earnings of 20% or 30% on a 10, 20, 30 billion, which is, something that you preserve and probably give shareholder returns on. On one end it was that, but, the more personal thing is, one day I found out that, my daughter was getting bullied in school. And she was sort of like influenced to spend her pocket money to buy stuff for her friends from the bookshop. And that led me to a conversation with my kids about the topic of money, because I was never around. I used to fly out every week. I had a regional role. Prior to that, I was based in the Middle East. I traveled once in 2 months back home to see the kids. So what I realized is our kids really today, they don't understand the hardship of money. They always took money for granted, right? Very different from me. My dad was a government servant, right? Some months it's decent one. Some months you have no money. When the fridge spoils, my mom will pawn her jewelry, right? That's how we used to buy a new fridge. And what I realize is most youth today, they learn about money the hard way. Their first lesson comes when they get their first credit card, right? And today with things like buy now, pay later, the distractions are plenty, right? And no one really learns how to plan to manage money better. Now, governments, corporates, everyone is focused on the adults, but no one is focusing on kids. So that's how Vircle was born. It's visible circles about creating a circle of trust in all matters financial between parents and kids. So on one end, I said, okay, how do we teach kids about money digitally and scalable? When kids don't necessarily have a phone. So you had to put parents empowered to do it and give them
The card.
the tools.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So some global references focused on few skills, right? Teaching kids to earn, so they understand money doesn't grow in trees. Save, give, and spend responsibly, right? So we thought, okay, we should build a financial learning app or a digital banking app, neo-banking app, whatever you want to call it, focus on the needs of kids. And one of the limitations of doing that today is if you want to open a bank account for your kid, you still need to walk your kid to the bank. And they need to be physically KYC. You can't digitally KYC kids. And even having said that, child accounts have a lot of limitation. If you're under 18, you have no internet banking access. Your debit cards are very basic and so on. So it was back in 2019, 2020 when I was doing a lot of research with, actually 2018, I started my research work. And in 2019, I made a decision, it's time to quit.
So it was the first year when I met you.
Yes, though I was still consulting for my previous company while we met. Now, to solve this, you need to make sure that kids can get access to banking payments in a safe way under parent oversight, without having very complicated child KYC processes. So we built the whole service on top of the concept of purpose-bound money. So the money always stays with parents, even when they transfer money to kids. This purpose-bound money allows parents to set rules on how you can spend. Now, we could have done a lot of things. We could have built a savings app, a missions app, a learning app. But what we realized at that point when we spoke to parents is many Asian parents think they know how to teach kids about money. So if you build an app focused on teaching and learning,
No one will use it.
nobody will use it. And we've seen others who try to do it in this part of the world, they eventually fail. If you talk about building an app focused on investing for kids, they've also all failed, right? But then what we focused on is, okay, all parents give kids pocket money. All kids spend pocket money in this part of the world. If we digitize pocket money with oversight and control to parents, then it's more likely they will use it. And then with that, we give them all the tools to teach kids about finance. So very naive, but it was, okay, I want to do this, right? And then I started, and then I realized how difficult the regulatory part of it was.
It needs a couple of years of Bank Negara paperwork, is it?
It's paperwork. I mean, we were lucky because we met with Fastpace, which is another startup who wanted to convert their e-wallet license to a banking as a service license. So we were one of the pioneers to partner with them and said, look, I don't have money at the time to go for a license. You know how to build banking rails. You have the license, but I want to build whatever I want on top of your license. So we went together, we submitted to Fastpay, but it took us like almost 18 months before we got the actual go-ahead that we could launch, because the purpose-bound money, in fact, the purpose-bound money term really came about only in 2022.
Wow.
It was made popular by Monetary Authority of Singapore when they did a trial about how they use a utility of a SGD coin with a smart contract on how you can spend it for social purposes. But we built the first commercial system in 2019, right? And 2020, we already went live with the initial trials and so on. Then come the question of how do you go to market? We had absolutely no money. I put in my own money to start, right? So doing a consumer play just didn't work.
Sorry, your own money means you went all in or part of your money?
Unfortunately, it was almost all in. I mean, I allocated some for
Rent
putting
and
food on the table. And then with COVID, it was very humbling in the sense that I think entrepreneurship is a good way to go from T20 to B40.
Exactly, yeah.
Very quickly, right?
How does your wife feel about that move?
I don't know. I mean, I'm so glad that she was patient. It's very stressful not having enough money, both to run the company and to put food on the table. I mean,
the
lifestyle change was massive, right? At one point, we were quite bad. The only asset I could sell is my car, right? And I still drive a rental to today. But yeah, I mean, it's a painful journey. But at that point, I knew that this has a strong potential. But we need to ride through COVID, because we made a decision that time to keep the growth costs low. We're going to introduce this technology in schools and acquire families through schools, right? And that was a strategy none of the global neobanks used. So if you look at all the global players, in fact, 50% of them have shut down already. They went with the D2C model, where they only do a child say Visa or MasterCard with all this learning, and they had to burn a lot of money on customer acquisition.
And B2C is very difficult in this part of the world also.
Yeah, and also if you look at the other parts of the world, they had a subscription model. Subscription model for financial services is unheard of in this part of the world. We are still experimenting on that. with different bundles and cross promotions and stuff like that. But it's still not proven. I mean, so we started off by partnering with a school. I still remember we tried to convince many, and
So which school was that? Let's give him a shout out.
so a special shout out to Dr. Vincent from Fairview International School. In fact, we had another school at the time that initially said, yes, we want to go live, and then they pulled the plug in the 11th hour. And then I was so frustrated the evening. I remember it was a Friday evening like this. I came back home.
Is there a campus in Sungai Buloh?
No, they're Fairview is in Wangsa Maju,
Okay.
Subang Jaya.
Okay.
They're also in Ipoh, Penang,
right.
and so on, right? So I went to LinkedIn and I searched for international school principals.
Yes.
And this Dr. Vincent popped up.
Wow.
And then he looked young, and I just wrote to him and I said, look, I am a founder of this startup. We have built a whole digital and cashless system for schools, which includes pre-order of meals, which is what we see as prominently asked for during COVID times. And we also have a special emphasis on nutrition, because when we launched at the time, we do a lot of nutritional profiling on the kind of food children were eating in school. And we gave parents a nutritional dashboard using the food traffic light models. And I think that caught his eye because he's a medical doctor. And he said, this sounds interesting. Come, let's have a chat. And we met him, and he said, okay, I will let you experiment, but don't get me in trouble, right? You need to make sure everything is checked out. And that's how we did. We were allowed to do a limited launch in August 2020 with Fairview. And then we acquired 2 other schools after that.
Nice.
And then in March, we were given the green light to scale, and that's where we landed the first large schooling group, which was the KDU, which is now owned by the XL Education Group. And by securing that group, gave us a lot of credibility, right? And also, we made sure we did so many things that didn't scale. We still do a lot of things that don't scale because we have personal touches with the school. I'm in 200 plus WhatsApp groups with merchants, schools. And the whole idea is when the school says, hey, something is not right or I need something, we respond immediately.
The SLA,
Yeah, there's no SLA, right?
so it's not even black and white.
There's no
You
black
just do
and
it
white
voluntarily.
SLA, but we make sure that we strive to be, there's no room for
So
complaint.
best effort, basically.
Yeah. And I think till a long time, we never had a sales guy, right?
Well, you are the main sales guy.
Yeah, it was, that's every founder's responsibility, and the early staff, some of them are my friends, and, some we hired off, just had to figure out how to do things low cost and, where our customers will recommend. I mean, fast forward 3 years since 2021, we are the largest player. We have over 70 schools, over 100,000 families. And now the stress is, we're growing fast. The organization
Good problem.
Yeah, organization needs to catch up, right?
It's amazing to see how far you've come since we met. I want to stop at one point, though. Since you decided to go through the proper regulatory framework, knowing that it would take you longer time, it will deplete your cash reserves, but you still invested and slowed yourself down from go to market because you wanted to start on the proper footing, right? You just said we got the green light, then we pushed the gas and made it happen. Is that the only way to do things, or is there also a less responsible way where you just go to market without the proper licensing and you just expand like crazy, and then then what happens? So tell us a bit about that.
Well, interestingly, over the last 2 years, there are 2 or 3 companies that have started to go into schools, especially government schools. They have no license. They don't operate under the e-money laws. And
so they went faster, right? So they were in, I guess, in more schools than you because they ran faster. Or
I mean, one did reach close to our size, and then of course central bank now has stepped in to say, hey, It's either you do something about it or we're going to shut you down, right? So the regulators sometimes might be late to react.
But they will react.
But when the moment they see you grow big, they will come and clamp down on you. Now, in terms of why I didn't take that route, my dad worked for the IRS or LHDN.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So he always preached to us, never break the law. If you get fined for your tax, pay it, then appeal. Do not appeal and wait before you pay, right? Follow the rules. And at that time, I knew very clearly, because I don't come from the banking industry. I came from telecom, broadcast media, and I jumped in banking. The first thing I did is I went and spoke to a lot of people. And the challenge we have in the corporate world is our network is our industry. So suddenly I was going into an industry where I had no clue who to speak to. So I actually built my entire network from scratch. I shamelessly went and asked people, can I buy you coffee? I want to understand a little bit more of this. And that's how I learned. And then I also went up to read, and I realized what's the risk of not getting regulated, right? And the last thing I need to explain to my wife is, okay, there's no money in the table and I'm going to jail. Or we're getting fined 10 million for not following the rules. That's too much. You see, when you're young, single, you can take more risk and get away with that. But it's like us.
Yeah, you have a family.
When you're in the fourth series, starting up the fourth series is insane. I mean, I realized what a foolish risk I took a couple of years ago to go down this journey, because you have big risks. You have kids, you have wife, you have heavy loans to pay, right? So you need to minimize that risk. So don't take stupid risk, right? Like regulatory stuff, go through that. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
But you still didn't tell us when the regulatory hammer came down, when the music stopped for the non-licensed players. What happened to them? Couldn't they have just filed the paperwork and just get the same license that you have, or it was too late?
So it's interesting. So the way we do banking for kids is using a very strong parental control framework. That's an IP that we built. It's not a know-how that people can understand very easily how to do, right? Now, of course, with purpose-bound money coming out, there are some concept papers that you can try and build that. Now, most of these players, they have built individual accounts that's operated by a parent and so on. Now, from a regulatory point of view, I mean, I can't comment on the regulators.
But what happened to the company? Tell us
so
about the
one such company is now talking to us, potentially to move the entire cashless schools, which is a huge number to us, which will more than double our current install base. So we're currently in duty with them. Nice. And I think that's also part of the settlement that they have made with the regulators that, hey, we will,
we'll park our business at someone who's licensed, kind of.
Yeah. Or, if they, halfway change their mind, they can, but they just have to, work with one of the many white label providers. But the reality is it's not about just building the tech with a white label, because there are many white label providers, right? Fastpay is not the only one. That's, so many other companies doing that. And if you have money, you could build one. But not many people understand the pressures of operating such a service, compliance, fraud, and also performance. Like, what you don't realize is now when you operate in outside of schools, your traffic is fairly uniform, maybe a bit here and there. When you do something in the financial service for schools, you're doing
peak time.
30, 40,000 transactions in 2 1-hour periods, right? Yes. And this is growing like 10, 20% every month, because when kids go cashless, they start tapping, right? So there is a lot of performance.
And I think that there is such a high risk if something goes wrong. Like if a kid can't buy lunch at school, that's a disaster, right? Like God forbid, touch wood. I hope you never go through that. But what would be actually the reaction in that instance?
So we've had such scenarios in the early days.
Okay.
But that lucky we learned that we cannot fail in the canteen. You can fail in anything, a bookstore, in-app, school fee payment, school fee financing, you can fail. You can't fail because the kid might be okay, but the parent will come after you. Of course. So over the years, we've built so many compensating feature sets and mechanisms. So we also do food and credit. So if something goes wrong, in our backend or a banking partner's backend.
The transaction still goes
Yeah,
through.
so we have a smart system that automatically checks, okay, if the timeouts are increasing, it automatically turns it into credit mode. So then, and we have a way to collect back that funds. We are also now about to release offline. So what if the network completely dies in the school? How do I cache it? Because today they write down, right? So recently we had one of the international schools had a complete network failure. The kids had to write down their card serial number and the amount, which is not feasible.
Of course, and too slow as well.
Yeah, so we
can't do it for 100 children, right?
Even 100 is tough, but some of our schools, they have like 800 kids, 1,000 kids, right? And then we are in public schools, which are quite big. They have 1,000 plus kids in 2 recess. So we've built so many of these feature sets that you don't see in the outset that makes us so powerful in schools that, nowadays when school come to us and we tell them what we can do, they say, okay, there's a no-brainer. There's nobody else who can do what all you guys are doing and who has thought through all the different issues that can go wrong and what parents want and how do you handle them.
So you've mentioned, did you mention that you want to bank 1 million Malaysian children and 5 million Asian children within the next 5 years?
Yes, that's the plan. So of course now, I mean, with the recent close of our Dana Impact Fund last year, which was, by the way, a 1-year process.
Yeah, mine was 13 months. So
yeah, so it's so people don't understand funding doesn't come overnight. You start today.
You're going to get the money maybe 2026 possibly.
Yeah, so we want to do our Series A. And what we thought is, we still have a lot of runway. And I told the team, I think we need to start now.
Yeah.
Our numbers are looking good. And it's going to take us 12 months, right, to close the process. But, so we are in the right trajectory, and we have very clear paths to grow in Malaysia. But at the same time, now, being part of the international school community, a lot of international schools in this part of the world is owned by private equities who have, schools in other Southeast Asian countries. So one of such partners that come to us and say, look, we are having a lot of issues in this country. We have X number of schools. I know it's going to take time to get a license to do cashless, but can you do everything else? Meals, school fees, comms, and so on. And then maybe, 6 months or 1 year later, you launch the tap and pay. So now we are looking into that, and since we already
I think that will give you more transaction fees, right? Because I think the ticket size in, for example, like sports events or uniforms or books is higher than the meal you buy, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, just to let you know, non-fees, the biggest ticket size I've ever seen to the platform is like a trip to Japan for almost 8,000 ringgit.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's how much parents are spending.
There isn't a wallet limit. Or?
So for big items, you don't pay with the wallet balance. We have a partnership with RHB Bank, and it's a pay direct, and then parents have different options based on what the merchant wants to activate. So
you make a transaction fee on every transaction.
Yes, it's like a platform fee similar to Grab, but not as high as Grab, of course.
Yeah.
But
that'd be nice.
Yeah. So we've made a platform that's palatable, no huge, there's no recurring cost, there's no SaaS fees, nothing. Just use, put more traffic in, and let's monetize together.
I'm sure that your VCs, well, let's practice for the upcoming A round conversations. They would ask you, wouldn't traditional banks, go after this if it becomes big enough, any of the big banks can make a children app or whatever. So what is your defensibility against this kind of thing?
So it's interesting because we are in the process of, it's not public, and so I can't talk much about it, but we're integrating the ability to open a bank account for kids through Vircle with a partnership with a bank.
Okay.
It's a 1-year process. And the genesis of that is the bank wanted to do what we could do. And the general challenge with banking industry is the innovation team has all these ideas. And then when it goes to compliance team, they say, no, the risk is too high. Because, banks, the regulators are not very forgiving to banks who make mistakes. You recently read, several of the major banks were fined quite a hefty sum for outages, right? Or repeated outages. So, they're still a bit more conservative and they can't bypass their KYC regulations, right? And that makes it more difficult. It's not that it's going to stop them. So here's the interesting thing. We have a bank and you have another e-wallet that allows 12-year-olds to open an account without recorded parent consent. Even though Malaysia very clearly states under the contracts law, a minor cannot enter the contract. But if you look at what these guys have put in their terms and condition is, if you're under 18, you need to ask your parents' permission. And if you proceed to create an account, it's deemed that you have obtained your parents' permission and your parents shares your liability. The reality is a child can't even agree to that legally. They need a parent to agree on their behalf. But they still get to do it. They get away with that. But when something goes wrong, like one of the parents in one of these schools that we launched, she said, "Look, I really like this concept. I have one app to manage all my kids, and I can monitor the spending in and outside of school through the Visa card because I found my daughter having this other e-wallet app with money in it that didn't come from me. And after interrogating her, she found out that the money came from a boyfriend." Right? And this is a 16-year-old kid, and she had another ex-student who was giving her money peer-to-peer to her wallet. And this shocked the parent. And then she said, how could she be allowed to register for an account, complete a KYC, and get a 20,000 limit?
Oh, she did.
Yeah, and now
the big limit.
Today, a 12-year-old is allowed to have their own Visa card without the parents' knowledge with some of these wallets, right? So for us, from very beginning, we took a whole approach, right, built by parents for parents. So we put the parent responsible for the principal account, and the parent onboards and manages the kids. And of course, 2 years ago, we also launched the first child-safe Visa card, which has safety features that you don't see in any banks, right? Or even other wallets.
So safety feature mean that you have a say over the transactions that are allowed? Like, can I say like, my kid can buy salad but can't buy candy?
Not outside of school,
Okay.
because you don't get access to POS.
Yeah.
But I think
But in the canteen.
Yeah, in the canteen, to some extent, yes, you can say where you can spend.
Okay.
Because also some of these canteens become very, we have schools where the canteen has 12 stalls each. It is like a pasta stall, a salad stall, a sandwich bar, and things like that, right? And now the parent can't decide, or if they give them, okay, you can only spend $10 in a salad store. The kid says, no, but I want pasta today, right?
Right.
So schools prefer us not to implement that in schools. But outside school, the common complaint from parents is, oh, my kid overspent on my credit card for buying game credits, right? But I still need to give him access to my credit card because he's using Grab, for example, right? So we went on a step further. Number one, of course, parents can enable disabled channels. Like if I don't want my kid to spend online on my Visa card, I can turn it off. But we also went on to allow parents to have category controls. So I can still let my child spend spend his Vircle Visa card online, but you can't buy digital goods, right? And those IPs are built by us. And you would see no banks allow you to do category controls on the card. And we were the first to launch that in the market. And then now we engage with parents and ask them what they want. So now the latest ask is, okay, my kid keeps going to this particular merchant. I want to blacklist this merchant only for this child, right? So that's something we can do. We do that globally for our fraud list, where we ban merchants based on certain names and strings and pattern matching and so on. So now we are saying, okay, we let parents create your own blacklist on the cards and so on. So it's like that. So a lot of what we do is driven by parents.
So maybe the final question is about your partnership strategy. So first you partnered with someone who had sort of the banking rails, and you built on top of that. Then after that you started to serve. I'm sure that the early schools were kind of like more a partner than a customer, because they helped you with the feedback loop so that you can improve your product. But now, do you see that partnerships is key to your growth strategy? Are you or are you just going to go straight to market without any, like you mentioned the bank, for example? So will that bank deliver customers to you, or it's just about an additional feature to your existing customers?
Yeah, so partnership is going to be key for us. So the current discussion with the bank is they would promote us in the branch, and we will promote them in the app.
Okay.
Right? But so that's one. If you remember, there's a lot of PR recently. We partnered with a telco,
Yes.
Mobile,
Yes.
to do public schools. So they are a very good partner, and we are looking at a wider collaboration strategy for public schools with Mobile. And also, what's just recently launched is a waitlist. So we partnered with Universal Studios to launch the first exclusive Minions themed Visa prepaid
Wow.
card in Malaysia.
Yeah, I remember seeing your Facebook post like, "Hey guys, does anyone know how to get the rights for Universal or something like that?" I'm glad you got that sorted in the end.
So, basically, not on Facebook, but I posted the same thing on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And an ex-connection of mine who used to work for HBO in Singapore, he's no more with HBO right now. He called me up and said, okay, this Pacific Licensing holds universal rights. Go meet this person, that person. And eventually it didn't. I mean, it costs quite a bit of money, but we got the rights to issue the cards. The wait list is out. Hopefully we'll start distributing it to our club members in November. So it's 4 designs and very limited in quantities.
Nice. I'm sure it's going to be a hit, definitely, with your users. So, okay, let's connect your outlook with some of the things that we have heard at KMF 2024. Do you feel that now the future is favorable to Vircle, having listened to all these megatrends and the focus for the coming period?
I think, access to capital and I think a more open market with the current government helps. Personally, as an entrepreneur, I don't expect anything else. Because it's really for us to chart that cost. Of course, at some point, the exit path, which is a general problem for the startup industry in Malaysia, makes a lot of sense because you need to have a big brother. You need to have stronger footing if you want to really do big stuff, right? I mean, even if you look at the mainstream wallets, they are owned by GLCs or banks, right? And the ones who are not are non-existent today.
And they lost money for a few years. Like I think some of them still lose money, right?
All of them lose money. Some have exceeded -1 billion in negative retained earnings.
Wow. So does that make you excited about fintech space?
See, I always say this to the investors and people, right? There are 2 plays in fintechs, the way I look at it. There is the volume play, which are what the big guys are doing, mass market, general purpose, remittance, peer-to-peer.
Everything to everyone.
Everything to everyone. And they're focused on, where I think the future of fintech is what you call the value play, where fintech is not necessarily the spotlight, it's an acquisition tool. But what you're monetizing is the segment, right? So we are in the family finance, family banking space. We use fintech to access the family, but it doesn't limit us from, so today we are doing insurance or we're planning to do insurance in, like we're going to healthcare and so on for kids. So we tailor products for kids or everything and anything parents need for kids. So it's a one-stop shop for everything you need for your child, right? Which is not shopping, because there's so many other players. I mean, we have Nadira focus on kids and so on, right? Kiddo care. So the value play doesn't necessarily require you to burn millions or hundreds of millions to build your market. You just need to be razor focused on a vertical that's big enough to monetize. So if you look at the segment we are in, kids in Malaysia under 18s is 9 million almost of the population. Southeast Asia is 162 million. Wow. And out of the 162 million, 72 are urban. So it's a market of 72 million. And if you look at the neo-banking space globally, the largest player, Greenlight Cards, has got 6 million parents and kids, right? Of course, it was easier for them. It's a unified single market, the US. But the reality is, the opportunity in Southeast Asia just with the urban. So if I just focus on 10% of urban, it's still 7 million, right? So when I talk about 1 million, it's nothing.
Doesn't seem too ambitious, right?
It doesn't,
1 out of 9.
Yeah.
Right?
But what we need to do is not be too careless in the process. So we do not do anything with a negative unit in economics.
Yes. That's just obvious because you actually can't, even though you have raised money, but you can't accurately predict when would be the next money coming in. So you just don't have the luxury to run negative unit economics because what if the next funding is late or something like that, right? So we still, in a sense, even though there is capital in the market, we have been through the rough times.
Yeah.
So we still are cautious about how we use the money we raised.
Yeah, and I mean, there were a lot of startups that burn venture capital fund on COGS, which just doesn't make sense, right? So we have walked away from partnerships where net on the COGS level, it's negative. It's a negative gross profit. No, I'd rather be smaller and be profitable than to be huge and everyone's talking about you, and but then you can't sleep at night because you need to know where you're going to get the next million, right?
So you started this journey in 2019. In your vision, when do you think ideally you would pass the baton, or is there any exit plan for you as an entrepreneur? I know your investors probably have, but you.
I mean, we've received, sort of solicitation to be acquired this year, right?
Wow. But you didn't like the number or what?
No, I just didn't entertain it in the sense that I said, look, if you are really serious, put an offer to the board.
Okay.
Right? Don't come and try to court me. I don't have time for dating, right? And it's now, of course, two of our biggest investors. I would say not biggest. I mean, we have 500 as a main investor, but if you look at on a board, we have MOF represented through KMP, and Khazanah represented by Gobi Dana Impact, right? So it's no more my decision to say yes, I want to sell or not. It's a collective decision of the board. So yeah, I mean, people can bring their offer to the board. If the board says, hey, I think it's good for you to be acqui-hired or something like that, then we will consider it. But the reality is we're just scratching the surface, right?
But what if the number is like juicy enough?
I mean, look,
because look, I totally agree with you. Governance, board, if they don't want to do it, I can't do it. But you're still in the driver's seat on the execution. So in a sense, what you feel does actually, have an echo and will be considered by the board. Like, okay, if this entrepreneur is too exhausted, if this entrepreneur wants to de-risk his life, if this entrepreneur wants to be acqui-hired and then he has a kind of a semi-corporate, right? Because you have the backing of a corporate, but at the same time, it is your company and your brand that you're building. So maybe that is the mode of life that you would like to pursue at this stage.
I mean,
how many years actually? After how many years I agree. Look, you will always be scratching the surface. I mean, you said 162 million children, right? So even if you reach your ambitious goal of 5 million children, someone could argue that you are still scratching the surface, even at 10, even at 20. So when do you think it's time?
I think it's always time. It's just a matter of whether collectively you can exit. I mean, personally, right, what I've always liked, I set up my first company at 18, selling computers house to house. And I've led innovation units in Ericsson before in the Middle East and so on. I love building products, scaling products, and selling. I think the part of entrepreneurship that a lot of people don't like is raising capital, which is the most important part, right? And always not being able to sleep because do I have enough money? What's my runway? How far away am I from profitability? So when I went through hell last year, I mean, on 2 occasions last year, I fell out. Am I having a heart attack? The palpitation was so bad because things were just getting delayed, showstoppers, change of terms. I just at one point couldn't take it, right? And I was like, shit, I don't want to be in this position anymore. So after we closed the deal and we had a first board meeting, I went to the board and said, look, I'm changing the strategy. I know I gave you this 5-year growth plan.
But you're in now. Now it's now I'm the boss kind of thing.
But I said, look, let's have a conversation, right?
Yeah,
because of course. End of the day,
I did the same, by the way.
Your board member, I said, look,
I told the board, look, guys, thank you for investment, but hey, I don't want to burn too much of your money, so I'm actually not gonna spend most of it. I'll only spend a bit. And I will try to still make my numbers, but if I don't and I don't touch your money, I think you're still gonna be happy. So we had a conversation, and now we've reached sort of a nice balance kind of thing. Because I also don't want to burn too much money, right? Because if I burn too much money, and let's say, God forbid, the investment market hasn't recovered, and then I'm forced to raise my next round at an unfavorable valuation, then you have dilution, then you have new people that have to tell you what to do and so on. So it is not ideal. And also when you spend like 1 year or 13 months raising funding, you really don't look forward to the next one so soon, right?
Correct.
So you want to give
It's a
yourself a breather.
it's a full-time job. And so I told my board, look, I think I want to reprioritize profitability for Malaysia before we go into the next market. So of course, in the last board meeting, and I said, look, we have this opportunity in the second market. What do you think? And then the board said, didn't you just in January said you want to push expansion to 2025, 2026? I say, yeah, but maybe I'll find different money to do it, right? And there's opportunities and stuff like that.
Yeah, if someone will fund it locally, then
Yeah.
maybe it's worth it. Yeah,
Yeah, but the reality is they were actually very supportive. They were
yeah.
actually,
I would be supportive if it's someone else's money for sure.
yeah. So they said, yeah, I mean, your burn is going to increase because traffic is increasing, cloud cost is going up, licensing cost is going up. And they said, okay, do as much as you can to turn a profit as quick as possible. We are more than 50% already past that
Nice,
stage right
nice.
now. So we have a bit more, another 50% to go. So focus on that. And, yeah, but it still keeps me awake. We have a team of 30 people, right, to feed. So, yeah, it's very surreal. And of course, an acquisition by a bigger corporate where I can focus on building the business, the product, of course, elevates the stress. It doesn't change shareholder returns, but for the current shareholders, but at least it gives me a bit more, I would say, peaceful sleep at night.
Yeah,
Right.
I would agree. Okay, give us some final thoughts or parting words to the entrepreneurs that are watching us. This is an entrepreneur-centric podcast. So, what would you tell the younger Gokula who would be starting his entrepreneurship journey right now?
I mean, if you're young, okay, you have youth and time to your advantage. You have nothing to lose, right? I think most important thing being this part of the world is young kids love to drown themselves in debt, right? Keep no debt and go and try things out. If it doesn't work, you have nothing to lose. So use your youth to your advantage, right? Now, entrepreneurship is never going to be easy. In fact, I just recently saw Anthony Tan's CNA or CNBC interview, right? And when he was talking about the challenges he went through, how he felt, I was like having goosebumps. Like that's exactly how we feel, right?
But according to Brahmal, that the guy has like raised more money than his company's worth. So it's like in private equity sense, it's not actually a success, even though it's a market leader in many ways and so on. So I guess different people look at things in different ways.
Correct. I mean, Facebook was without revenue for 7 years, right? And it's a $1 trillion company or near there. So the reality is, be very clear. And I always say, don't kid yourself. What problem you want to solve? How big is the problem? And is it really worth solving? Because not all problems need a solution. And not all solutions is going to make you money, right? And most of the time when we want to market test, we market test with people we know and our friends and people that we ask for feedback will never say negative things to you. They will not say this doesn't make sense, is silly, right? So you think you have product market fit, but actually you don't, right? So you need to ask some really strong, brutal feedback to validate whether it makes sense or not. And if it makes sense, just go and do it.
Thank you, Gokula. It was a pleasure co-hosting this episode with you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Mo.
I would like to remind our listeners that the opinions, views, and content expressed on the Sunicorn Nation podcast are those of the entrepreneurs and guests featured, and do not reflect the official policies or positions of Proficio Consultants, Pinjana Capital, or the rest of the Sunicorn Collective. The good news is entrepreneurs can finally unlock unlimited growth capital by aligning their innovation with the nation's strategic objectives. Potatoes not only ended famine in historical China, they also boosted its national prosperity. The best innovations raise the floor and the ceiling at the same time. See you next time at Sunicorn Nation.